come play with us in the dark.
Setting the unsettling tone, immediate dread, ending in cliffhanger cold wind rattled the window frames of the old Victorian house at the edge of town. The family's youngest, Emma, shivered under her blanket, listening to a sound that made her skin crawl, a soft, dragging shuffle coming from the hallway outside. Her father's footsteps echoed from the living room, but the dragging continued. She blinked, thinking it a trick of the shadows. Then a whisper slipped through the crack under the door. "Don't move." Emma froze, heartbeat hammering. The whisper wasn't her father nor her mother, and certainly not any sibling. It had an edge, a sharpness that made her blood run cold. A vase toppled in the kitchen, shattering, though no one had entered. The family dog whined low, tail tucked, refusing to look at the corner where the shadow seemed densest. Then came the laugh. A slow, hollow, almost human laugh from the attic where no one had set foot in years. Emma's breath caught. Something in the air shifted, heavier now. As if the house itself were holding its breath, she wanted to scream, but her voice caught. She had no idea how long she stayed in the darkness until a cold hand, so cold it burned, touched her shoulder. She turned. No one was there. And then she heard it again. "I've been waiting." Cliffhanger. The whisper pulls the story forward into the introduction. What is this presence, and why has it chosen the family? The Thompsons had never believed in ghosts. They had bills to pay, jobs to worry about, school drop-offs, soccer practices, and the endless hum of city life that left little room for superstition. But when Michael found the Victorian house on the edge of town, its gabled roofs peeling, its windows dusty and dim, the family saw opportunity, a fresh start. The house smelled of damp wood and something faintly metallic, a lingering scent that made Laura wrinkle her nose as she stepped across the threshold. The floors groaned under their feet, long, hollow groans that echoed too loudly in the emptiness. The paint on the walls had cracked in long spiderweb patterns, and wallpaper peeled like skin in the corners. Michael laughed nervously, promising, "It's got character. You'll see. We'll fix it up." Emma, 8 years old and already prone to flights of imagination, felt uneasy. She clutched Max's hand, her older brother by 2 years, as they wandered the halls. Shadows pooled in the corners, and every step seemed to stir something unseen. At first they thought it was the creaking of the old house or their own minds. But shadows didn't move in perfect synchrony with their footsteps. That first night the creaking began to speak. Not words exactly, just murmurs, soft at first, slipping through the floorboards like mist. Laura lay awake, listening. She could swear she heard someone walking in the attic, even though the lock on the stairs had never been touched. Michael tried to laugh it off, but even he felt the weight of the air pressing against them. "Old houses settle," he said. "It's nothing." Yet when the lights flickered for the third time that evening, he couldn't deny the unease coiling in his stomach. The first warning came as a note, scrawled in charcoal on the kitchen table. "Leave now or stay forever." Laura found it before Michael returned from checking the fuse box. Her hand trembled as she held it up. "Michael, look at this," she whispered. Michael's brows drew together. "Kids?" he called, hoping it was one of them playing a prank. Emma and Max stood frozen in the hallway, eyes wide, shaking their heads. "I didn't do it," Emma stammered, voice trembling. Michael tried to convince himself it was a child's attempt at mischief, but the handwriting wasn't familiar. Slanted, jagged, deliberate. Something old, something deliberate had left it. That night the unease escalated. The family huddled in the living room, lights flickering, shadows stretching across the walls. A loud bang erupted from the basement, startling Emma into a high-pitched scream. Michael ran toward the stairs, but the moment he reached the landing, he heard it. A whisper, soft, chilling, perfectly mimicking his own voice. "I know what you did." His blood ran cold. He froze, glancing at Laura, who had gone pale, hand pressed against her chest. Emma buried her face in Max's shoulder, shivering violently. The whisper came again, closer this time, echoing as if it had corners to move around, coming from every shadow at once. Michael's rational mind faltered. He tried to convince himself it was his imagination, the pressure of the move, the unfamiliar creaks and groans of the house. But Emma's wide, terrified eyes told him the truth. Something was in the house, something watching. Days passed, but the tension never lifted. The air felt thicker, heavier. At night, doors creaked open on their own. Emma swore she saw a figure flit across the hallway when the light bulb died mid-flicker. Max complained that his toys moved while he slept. Laura could feel it in the kitchen, a cold breath brushing against the back of her neck, though no one stood there. Michael, desperate to maintain normalcy, installed locks, checked every bolt, and even searched the attic, which reeked of dust and decay. Nothing explained the disturbances, yet the feeling persisted. The house was alive and it was aware. One evening, Laura sat at the kitchen table, notebook in hand, attempting to catalog the oddities. Footsteps in empty rooms, objects shifting, fleeting glimpses of shadow. Emma joined her, shivering. "Mom, it's smiling at me," she whispered, pointing at the corner of the dining room where the shadows pooled. Laura felt a chill, realizing she could see it too. Not clearly, but enough, a flicker, a movement, a darkness that wasn't quite shadow. Her hand gripped Emma's, shaking. Michael's reassuring words fell hollow in the suffocating silence of the house. By the end of that week, the Thompsons felt as if the walls themselves watched. Sleep came in broken intervals, punctuated by creaks, whispers, and the distant sound of footsteps that never belonged to any of them. The family began to avoid certain rooms, instinctively knowing that some corners of the house held more than dust and old furniture. And yet, the presence made no move to harm. It observed. It whispered. It waited. Emma drew a small sketch of the figure she saw. Tall, shadowy, its face blurred and dark, eyes that seemed to pierce through her. She hid it under her pillow, terrified to show anyone else. Michael, finally realizing that rational explanations weren't enough, began to research the house's history. What he found would unravel everything they thought they knew about the old Victorian walls and the echoes that haunted them. But even before he could make sense of the records, the house reminded them, softly, insistently, that it had already chosen its tenants, and leaving would not be so simple. The house waited, and so did the eyes in the dark. The days stretched into a long, oppressive haze. Every corner of the house seemed to pulse with a presence. It began small, a draft that brushed against a shoulder, a floorboard that creaked when no one walked on it, but soon escalated into something undeniable, something deliberate. It started in the mornings. Emma would wake to find her drawings moved, pencils rearranged in sharp, precise lines that she had never made. One day she found her favorite teddy bear placed neatly in the center of the living room, its button eyes staring blankly at her. She wanted to tell Michael or Laura, but something in the air made her hesitate. The house seemed to thrum as if listening. At dinner, Max's fork slid off the table on its own, clattering loudly. The family froze. "Who did that?" Michael demanded, standing. "No one," Max whispered, wide-eyed. "I didn't touch it. I was eating." Laura's hand trembled as she reached for his. It's here," she said softly, almost to herself. "I can feel it." Michael's chest tightened. He wanted to scream that it was impossible, that the mind played tricks when the body was tired or stressed. But the sharp, uncanny precision of the events, the timing, the awareness, they weren't imagination. Something was watching them. The first real encounter came from the attic. Emma had wandered up the creaking stairs, curious. She had found a dusty photo album hidden beneath old blankets. The leather cover was cracked and cold under her fingers. Flipping it open, she found portraits of families from long ago, faces stiff in black and white, eyes carefully posed. And then she saw it. A photograph from 1902 showing a family of 4 standing in the parlor of the very house they now lived in. Behind them, almost invisible unless one looked carefully, stood a child. Its smile was faint, its eyes hollow, dark, and penetrating. Emma gasped. "Emma?" Max's voice called from the bottom of the stairs. I'm fine," she yelled back, closing the album, but the chill in her veins remained. The eyes in the photograph seemed to follow her, judging, waiting. Michael didn't believe her when she told him. "It's just a picture," he said. "Old houses have old photographs. You're imagining things," but Laura felt it immediately. That night, she woke to the sound of soft singing, lilting and broken, drifting from the attic. She rose quietly, creeping toward the door, but nothing was there. Only the faint echo of a child's laughter lingered in the corners. The neighbors spoke of it in hushed tones when Michael tried to ask. Mrs. Green, the elderly woman across the street, shook her head gravely. "You shouldn't have moved there," she said, gripping his arm. "That house, it never forgets. Fires, deaths, disappearances, they're all part of it. It remembers. Always." Michael dismissed her words at first. He had to. Believing otherwise meant accepting that the house was not merely a building, but something alive, sentient, and cruel. But the house made sure he could not dismiss it for long. At night, doors would open on their own. Emma's room was the epicenter. Her bedsheet would shift as though someone had lain beneath it. Max reported a figure standing at the foot of his bed, fading whenever he blinked. Lights flickered, shadows stretched and shrank unnaturally, and the air grew icy in moments without warning. Laura began keeping a journal, writing everything down in meticulous detail: the whispering voices, the objects that moved, the shadows that lingered too long. Emma drew sketches. One of them, hidden under her pillow, depicted a tall, shadowy figure with indistinct features, its face partially obscured, eyes dark and unrelenting. The family began hearing voices, not always words, but murmurs, indistinct phrases, fragments of threats. "I see you. You can't hide." Michael tried to convince himself it was fatigue, paranoia, something explainable. But the voices were precise, cruel, and intimately aware of them. Then came the journal in the attic. Michael found it while searching for Emma, who had wandered upstairs again. It was brittle with age, the pages yellowed and curling. The writing was old-fashioned, almost Victorian. "Who is this?" Michael whispered, flipping through the pages. "It's a diary?" Laura asked, appearing behind him, her hand on his shoulder. Her nails dug in slightly. The diary belonged to a child named Samuel who had lived in the house over a century ago. According to the faded handwriting, he had survived a fire that killed his family. But the entries spoke of something more, a ritual performed to bind his spirit to the house, to keep him safe from the anger of others who had wronged him. The final entry was smudged with something dark. "They cannot leave. They belong to me now." The family's unease grew into fear. The attic became forbidden, yet the disturbances intensified. Emma began sleepwalking, wandering toward the attic doors in the middle of the night, whispering to someone unseen. Max refused to go upstairs. Laura could feel cold hands brushing her hair while washing dishes, leaving a sting behind. Dialogue became a tool of survival and revelation. "Emma, he's angry. He wants us to stay. He's lonely, Max. He watches me in the mirror. I saw him smiling. Laura, I told you. It's real. It's here with us, Michael. We'll leave if it gets worse. I swear, but the house had its own rules. Every plan to leave was met with resistance. A car wouldn't start, a bridge was blocked by debris, keys vanished. Even the town itself seemed complicit, neighbors avoiding the Thompsons' gaze. The family's paranoia deepened. Arguments erupted over nothing. Michael would see fleeting shadows behind Laura and Emma, sometimes moving independently of the light. Items appeared and disappeared. Books shifted on shelves, chairs rotated, drawers left open after being closed. The pattern became undeniable. Something orchestrated all of it, a conscious presence with purpose. One night, Emma whispered from the darkness of her room, "He's showing us. The fire. He wants us to see." Michael and Laura followed, hearts pounding. Shadows coalesced on the walls, flickering and warping into images of the past. Flames consumed a family in one corner, smoke curling into shapes that twisted into faces, eyes pleading, mouths screaming. The air was hot and cold at once, smelling of charred wood and iron. The vision vanished as quickly as it came, leaving the family gasping in silence, drenched in sweat. The micro-events escalated. The ghost or presence grew bold. It started communicating more directly, leaving objects with messages. A toy soldier posed holding a small, blackened matchstick, a knife placed upright in the kitchen counter, charcoal words on the wall, "You cannot run." Neighbors whispered warnings when they dared speak, recalling the fire that had claimed Samuel's family, the strange disappearances of caretakers, and the rituals performed to contain the boy's spirit. Old Mr. Bennett. "I watched the boy. He survived when he shouldn't have. The house. He made it his own. You'll see. It wants attention, and it always wins." The Thompsons realized that the horror had layers. The figure was not mindless, it was aware, intelligent, and emotionally driven. Each disturbance seemed aimed at isolating them, breaking them down one by one. Sleep-deprived, they began questioning their own minds. Were they imagining things, or had the house claimed their perception? By the end of the conflict development, The family was fractured, Michael, desperate and angry, clinging to rationality while seeing it fail. Laura, emotionally shattered, documenting every whisper and shadow. Emma and Max, terrified children aware of the ghost's intentions, whispering warnings in the night. The house was no longer a building, it was a predator, and the family's survival depended on facing the truth they had avoided. They were not tenants. They were prisoners, and the ghost was patient, watching, waiting for the moment to make its final move. Cliffhanger into climax. The ghost's intelligence, history, and motives are revealed through these micro-events and escalating terror, setting the stage for the full confrontation in the attic, where past and present collide, and the Thompsons face the unstoppable presence of Samuel's spirit. The house had waited centuries for this moment. The Thompsons had learned its rules too late, had tried to escape its gaze, to ignore the patterns, but the entity Samuel was patient and infinitely cruel. It began with the attic. Emma, drawn by some invisible tug, found herself standing at the bottom of the stairs once again. Michael and Laura followed, both of them trembling. The air was heavy, thick with the scent of smoke and charred wood. The temperature dropped so sharply that their breath hung in white clouds before them. "Emma, stay behind me," Michael said, his voice low but shaking. She shook her head, eyes wide. He's waiting. I can feel him." Laura gripped her daughter's hand. "We have to face it," she said. "It's not leaving." As they ascended, the air around them began to shimmer, as though the world itself were bending. Shadows pooled along the walls, lengthening unnaturally, coalescing into forms that were almost human. Faint whispers drifted like smoke through the stairwell. "You cannot leave. You belong to me. They cannot escape. They are mine." The attic door groaned on its hinges. Michael reached for the knob and froze. The metal was ice cold, colder than anything he had ever felt, and pulsed faintly like a heartbeat. I can't," he muttered, stepping back. "Then I will," Emma said, stepping forward as if she were guided by an invisible hand. Her small fingers rested lightly on the doorknob. The temperature dropped further, a wind of unseen intensity whipping around them, slamming papers into the air. And then the laughter came. A deep, hollow, childlike laugh that made the floorboards shiver beneath their feet. Inside the attic, the world had changed. The room was the same size, yet impossibly vast. Dust swirled in a gravity of its own. Faint outlines of past tragedies hung in the air, flickering ghostly recreations of the 1902 fire, a family screaming, flames licking their clothes and faces, shadows of Samuel moving in the smoke. "Michael, look," Emma whispered, pointing. Michael's breath caught. Samuel's figure had formed, not fully human, not fully shadow, an outline of a boy, dark and shimmering. His eyes glowed faintly, black pits burning with memory and malice. He hovered a foot above the floor, moving in jerky, unnatural motions. "You can see me," the boy whispered, voice both childlike and ancient. "I've waited. I've watched. You shouldn't be here." Laura stepped forward, clutching Emma. "We didn't know. We didn't mean—" "You mean nothing," Samuel said. His voice echoed in the corners, bouncing, multiplying. Shadows twisted into fingers that reached for them, curling along walls and ceilings. The attic seemed alive, breathing, closing in. Michael tried to grab a chair, anything to defend them, but it twisted in his hands, elongating, the legs writhing like snakes. Objects from the past appeared, scorched toys, photographs, charred books, all floating, spinning, circling the family. Samuel's voice rose, overlapping with whispers. "They can't leave. You belong. The house remembers. The fire. You will see." Emma screamed. Max's voice rang from the hallway outside. They hadn't noticed him leave. "Emma." "Mom, Dad, what's happening?" Samuel's shadow surged toward the door, and Max shrank back against the wall. The temperature plummeted further, their breaths puffing out in clouds, frost forming on their hair. The past and present collided in the attic. Flames, shadows, echoes of long-dead voices, the lingering scent of smoke and sorrow. Michael realized, finally, what the diary had warned. They were not merely guests. They had stepped into a cycle, one that repeated every generation. Samuel's spirit was trapped, yes, but the house had learned how to feed on fear, how to twist perception, how to prevent escape. The ghost's attacks became physical in ways that made no sense. Doors slammed shut behind them. The staircase they had used to ascend now twisted into a spiral that reached impossibly high, floorboards cracking under imagined weight. A chandelier swung violently, then shattered, raining shards of glass that hovered inches above the floor before falling softly, deliberately where they would hurt none but terror. Why us? Laura shouted, clutching Emma. Her voice broke. Because you are alive. You breathe. You remember. You can feel, Samuel said, voice sharp, echoing through every shadow. I waited for life to return here. I waited for someone to notice me. Emma, trembling, stepped forward. You just want us to see, to remember you? Yes, Samuel whispered, but the words stretched, elongated, twisted into a scream that rolled through the house like thunder. You cannot leave. You will understand. Pain, fire, loss, fear, forever. Michael realized the house itself obeyed Samuel's will. Even the walls were moving, bending, closing in. The ceiling rose and fell like the chest of a sleeping giant. Time seemed elastic. A second felt like a minute like hours. Every step they took repeated yet changed, sending them into loops that made the attic infinite. Max screamed, backing into a corner. The shadow of Samuel shifted, multiplying, filling the room with a darkness that was alive. He whispered the past, every event of that long-ago fire, every sorrow, every failure of those who tried to contain him. The attic became a theater of memory, anguish, and inevitability. Laura, crying, fell to her knees. Please, we didn't know. We didn't mean to. Samuel moved closer, his form flickering. A hand reached out. Not solid, not flesh, but a coldness that burned, pressing into Michael's chest. It forced him to the floor. Shadows wrapped around him, sliding into his skin, into his thoughts. His rational mind screamed, but the house drowned his words. You belong, the ghost whispered. As I belong. As the house belongs. All who enter are mine. Emma, desperate, did the only thing she could think of. She held her drawing, the sketch of the boy. Look, we remember. We see you. The shadows paused. The air thickened. Samuel's form wavered for a moment. The flickering images of fire, death, and destruction slowed. Yes, he said softly, almost mournfully. Finally, someone sees. But the pause was temporary. Samuel's frustration surged like a storm. The attic walls shivered, then cracked. Objects fell around them, twisting midair. Michael grabbed Laura and Emma, trying to shield them, but the house seemed to fight them, turning familiar features alien. The staircase stretched beyond comprehension. The ceiling pressed down. Time was distorted, past, present, and future colliding. You cannot leave, Samuel said again, voice layered with the pain of centuries. You are mine. All are mine. The family's breaking point arrived. Michael's knees buckled. Laura sobbed, clutching both children. Max was paralyzed with fear, eyes wide as he watched the shadows crawl up walls, pooling into human-like forms, mimicking their own faces. Emma screamed, a piercing note of terror, but Samuel's laughter, hollow and echoing, swallowed it. In one final surge, the attic exploded in sound. Whispers, laughter, screams, the roar of flames long extinguished. Time fractured. One moment, Michael was falling, the next frozen, the next watching himself from above. The house had become a living nightmare, and there was no corner untouched by its presence. And then silence. The family collapsed together in the center of the attic, breathing, alive, but changed. The shadow lingered, semi-visible, watching, waiting. Samuel's face hovered in the periphery, a reminder, a warning, a promise. The house had let them survive, but it had marked them. Michael finally whispered, voice raw and trembling. We have to leave. We have to get out. But the shadows shifted. Doors that had once been closed now led to impossible hallways. The stairs no longer reached the floors they had known. The house was no longer merely a building. It had become a labyrinth, and the family, prisoners. Samuel's voice, faint now, drifted through the walls, almost tender, almost satisfied. You have seen. You have remembered, but you cannot leave. Not yet. Not ever. The climax ended with the house alive, the ghost fully aware, and the family broken, psychologically, emotionally, trapped in a world where time and space obeyed the entity alone. Every member of the Thompsons had faced the impossible. The presence was unstoppable, inevitable, and patient. And in that attic they realized the horrifying truth. Survival was only temporary. The house would continue to claim them, shaping their fear, until the final moment when the entity finally consumed what remained of their spirits. The house had fallen silent, but silence was never truly quiet here. It was heavy, expectant, almost sentient. The attic, where the family had faced Samuel, now lay in unnatural stillness. Dust floated lazily in the dim light from the single cracked window. The Thompsons huddled together on the floor, breaths ragged, skin clammy, hearts hammering in unison. Every sound, the shifting of a floorboard, the distant creak of the stairs, felt magnified. Michael looked at his family. Emma, small and trembling, clutched the sketch she had made of the boy in the attic. Max sat against the wall, eyes wide, still frozen in terror. Laura rested her head on Michael's shoulder, silently shaking. None of them spoke for a long time. Words felt inadequate. The air still vibrated with the echoes of what had happened. The house seemed to watch them. A faint draft curled around their legs like a snake. Shadows pooled in corners, gathering and stretching. Michael's hand went instinctively to the wall. The wood was cool and solid, or so he thought. For a fleeting moment, the shadows thickened and formed the vague outline of a child's face, staring at him before dissipating. I think it's gone, Michael whispered, voice trembling. No, Laura said softly, shaking her head. It's not gone. It never leaves. We just survived this round. Emma clutched her sketch closer. It's waiting, she said, voice barely audible. And it knows we're afraid. Michael swallowed, attempting to ground himself in rational thought. Then we leave, he said. His voice sounded hollow even to him. We pack our things. Tonight we leave. But the house had other plans. The door to the attic, which they had entered so cautiously, now appeared further down the hall than it should. Every hallway seemed slightly longer, subtly altered. Familiar spaces twisted, turning corners into new rooms, floors sloping impossibly, windows showing glimpses of scenes that shouldn't exist, hallways filled with flickering fire, rooms crowded with ghostly figures. Max whimpered. We can't find the stairs. Michael tried to steady himself, but the floor beneath him shifted, groaning as if the house itself were breathing. His hand went to the banister, but it moved, stretching, curling like a living thing. He gripped Laura's arm, pulling her close. The house was not merely a structure anymore. It was a predator, and every step they took only led deeper into its labyrinth. They moved cautiously, silently, following the twisted hallways as best they could. Shadows danced at the edges of their vision, sometimes solid, sometimes amorphous, but always present. Occasionally they would see glimpses of Samuel, his face faint, hovering in mirrors, in windows, sometimes reflected on the walls themselves, watching, always waiting. Night deepened. The house seemed to pulse with life. The air was thick with the scent of smoke and cold earth. Floorboards groaned under invisible weight. Whispers rose in layers from every wall. They cannot leave. They belong. I've waited. I am patient. Laura sank to the floor, pulling Emma into her lap. We're trapped, she whispered. No matter what we do, it will always be here. Michael's mind raced. He thought of the diary, of the stories Mrs. Green and Mr. Bennet had told. He remembered the journal entries of Samuel, how he had survived the fire, how his spirit had been bound to the house, how he had learned to feed on fear, and now the Thompsons were part of that cycle. The family pressed on, moving through rooms that were familiar yet alien. A dining room appeared with chairs upright and polished, then shifted mid-step to show scorched remnants of the same furniture, blackened and twisted. Shadows of long-dead residents flickered, screaming in silence. The house had become a gallery of its history, a museum of suffering. Max froze in front of a mirror. His reflection moved differently than he did. The shadow behind him lingered, smiling faintly, eyes empty, yet piercing. Don't look, Emma said urgently, gripping his shoulder. It wants us to see. Michael's hands shook. We have to keep moving, he said. We can't stop. They climbed another set of stairs, stairs that twisted impossibly upward, spiraling into darkness. At the top they found the living room, yet it was not the living room they had known. The furniture was covered in soot. Walls bore the charred faces of Samuel's family. The air smelled of fire and iron. It was as if time itself had fractured, revealing layers of history, and all of it was happening at once. Laura's voice broke the silence. It's showing us everything, the fire, the waiting, the deaths. It's proud. Emma's small voice trembled. I think it wants recognition. It wants us to see it. Michael gritted his teeth. Then we'll see it, we'll see everything. But we're leaving. After this we leave. We survive, and we go. The shadows shifted again. Samuel's voice rose, layered with centuries of sorrow and rage. You cannot leave. You cannot hide. You belong. You will remember. The family pressed on. They moved as one, Laura holding Emma, Michael shielding Max as best he could. Every step was agony. Every hallway was a test of sanity. Objects fell around them but never harmed them physically. They were warnings, displays of control. The house was teaching them, bending them, breaking them, shaping their fear. And then they reached the front hall. Sunlight should have poured in through the windows, but the light was gray, dim, and cold. The front door was visible, yet impossibly distant. Michael tried the knob. It shifted under his hand like water. It's mocking us, he said, voice taut. It wants to prolong the fear. Suddenly, the shadows surged. Samuel's form appeared before them, larger than before, eyes hollow and unblinking. The whispers became a roar. They cannot leave. They belong. They are mine. The family froze, terror rooting them to the floor. Samuel's shadow reached out, enveloping the room. The walls groaned, the ceiling twisted, and a low wind carried whispers from every corner of the house. It was all around them, yet nowhere, omniscient, omnipresent. Emma, shaking, lifted her sketch of the boy. Look, we see you. We remember. We know you. The shadow paused, wavered, flickered. For a moment, the attic, the fire, the sorrow of 1902, the pain, the anger, the loneliness were all laid bare. Samuel's form became almost human, almost vulnerable. Yes, the boy whispered, voice soft and almost childlike. Finally, someone remembers me. Finally, someone sees. But the pause was brief. The house convulsed violently, the walls twisted, the ceiling groaned, and the shadows surged again. The Thompsons were thrown to the floor, breath ripped from their lungs, fear saturating every nerve. Michael, Laura, Emma, Max clung to one another as the house's energy crashed over them like a storm. You survived, Samuel whispered, voice calm, almost gentle. But remember, I am patient, I wait, I watch, you are mine. The shadows retreated slowly, the room settling into an uneasy quiet. The Thompsons lay on the floor, shaking, trembling, broken, but alive. Michael finally spoke, voice raw, hoarse. We have to leave. Now. Laura nodded, holding both children. We'll survive this. Somehow. But the house had changed them. They could leave, yes, but a piece of them would remain, a shadow of their fear, a memory intertwined with Samuel's presence. The attic, the shadows, the whispers, they were never gone. The house had claimed them, not fully, but enough. They stumbled toward the front door, every step echoing with the whispers of centuries. Outside, the sunlight looked pale, unreal. The town seemed to watch them, silent and empty. They could hear the wind in the trees, but it carried the faintest whisper, unmistakable. I am here. I wait. I am patient. Michael glanced at Laura. We'll survive. Laura shook her head. We'll survive, but we're not the same. None of us are the same. Emma clutched her sketch. He'll never forget us, she said quietly. No, Michael admitted. And we'll never forget him. The family walked away from the house, stumbling through the long driveway, sunlight on their backs, shadows stretching long behind them. But even as the distance grew, the attic remained, windows dark, waiting. Samuel watched. The house breathed, patient, eternal. And the Thompsons understood finally the truth they had been running from. Some horrors do not end. Some spirits do not rest. Some houses do not forgive. Even now, far from the front steps, Michael could hear it. Not a voice, not a whisper, but a feeling. Watching, waiting, patient. The house waits. And so does Samuel. Always.